Good afternoon. I'm Zara Mansour, a junior in the Art, Media, and Technology program at Parsons Barrett. Today I'm going to be talking about a video game and virtual reality project called Susti, A Journey of Love, that I headed in fall 2021, based around a Sufi story from Sindh, Pakistan. So let me start off by telling you about the story of Susti and Bannu. This is an animation that I drew, and the voices are of me and my 6 collaborators that worked with me on the project.
Sasi was born as the daughter of the Raja of Bambor in Sindh, modern-day Pakistan.
An astrologer predicted that she will be a curse on her royal family. So her parents sent her in a wooden box down the Sindhu River.
A washerman found her and adopted her as his daughter. She grew up to attain an astonishing beauty.
Tales of her beauty reached Pannu, the prince of Kachmakran in Balochistan. He came to Bambor, and he and Sasi fell in love at first sight.
Punnu convinced Sasi's washerman father of his love, and he and Sasi were set to get married.
Punhun's royal brothers disapproved of the match, and the night of the wedding celebrations, they intoxicated him and carried him back to Ketch as Sasri slept.
Sasi woke up the next day, devastated to see her beloved gone, taken miles away from her.
So after Sasi finds Punnu gone, she journeys barefoot across perilous terrain to find him. On this map where the X is marked, that's where Sasi reaches, and a shepherd sees her and tries to force himself on her. And there she prays to God, and the land swallows her up. On the other end, in Ketch, Punnu wakes up also and finds that he's been taken away from her. So he runs towards Bambor, and he meets the same shepherd at that same spot, and he finds out what happens. So he appeals to God with the same prayer, and he's also buried in the same valley as Sasi is. So they both are reunited underground. So I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, which is around an hour and a half's drive from where Bambor is, where Sasi was born. The story of Sasi surrounded me as something superficial. It was always presented to me as just a love story. You would see pawn shops around Karachi bearing Sasi's name, or this ridiculous toll plaza on the right with her name on it. But I never knew in all 20 years of my life that the story was in fact a metaphor for the human soul's search for the divine. Until I took a class on mysticism in Islam taught by Professor Sander Sheev here at the New School, which sparked the project that I'm presenting today. So Sufism is Islamic mysticism in which Muslims attain closeness to Allah by a personal experience of God. And Shah Abdul Latif Pitai was a 17th century Sindhi Sufi poet. And this is a photo of his shrine that I took last summer with a statue of him playing the sitar. So he wrote a body of poetry called the Risalo, where he expresses a spiritual interpretation of Sasi's story through poetic verses. Here, I want to introduce the concept of fana, which is integral to my project. So the Sufi concept of fana literally means self-annihilation. Fana is the ultimate form of love, which is a unionization with God. Sufism scholar Anne-Mary Schimmel, in this book, Mystical Dimensions of Islam, outlines how Sufi poetry strives to recognize the divine through love for other human beings, animals, flowers, precious stones, any sort of creations of God. In this aspect, Schimmel says, the Sufi sees traces of eternal beauty everywhere. So the final step, since the Sufi recognizes beauty in everything as a presence of God in every facet of the world, the final step would be to recognize this beauty in yourself, because you are also part of this divine creation. Schimmel puts fana as the ultimate experience of the identity of the human soul with the divine essence. Now, this is exemplified by Sasi, who represents the human soul, in her search for Pannu, who represents the divine, and she herself turns into him. Pitai describes this moment of fana in his verses. He says, in the voice of Sasi, "When I entered into myself and talked with my soul, there was no mountain in the land and no desire for the catchies. I myself became Punnu while I suffered as Sasi." Now, my takeaway from the concept of fana and the story of Sasi is that humanity itself is a divine presence, that you are a culmination of the relationships that you have with other human beings, and that divinity exists within those connections. Sufism, by the path of fana, is a beautiful quest for coming to love oneself through your human relationships. Now, Sasi sees all of these divine attributes in Pannu. He's patient, kind, forgiving, funny, beautiful. And the thing is that all of these attributes don't exist at once in any one person we know. But this love is spread between our relationships. Like my mom, who is in the virtual audience today, is patient with me. My flatmate and close friend Anushka, who's also in the audience in front of me, has been honest and open-minded towards me. And the thing is that you pick up all of these attributes that you love from the people that you know, and that's how you become a person that's capable of loving themselves. And this is the quest that my project aims to take the player on. So to create an experience of all of these ideas, we took the Shah's poetry of Sassi and turned it into an adventure and simulation game. It involved a lot of graphic design, 3D modeling, game engine usage, illustration, animation, and sound design. I'll play the trailer first to give you guys an immediate sense of the work. You enter the world as Sassi, symbolized by these mystical hands that you see on the screen, and you're embarking on your quest for Pannu. And all these landscapes are modeled around Sindh and Balochistan. And then you experience the verses, first in Sindhi and then in English.
रुञुन में रड़ थी कर कोयल जी कूक रुञुन में रड़ थी कर कोयल जी कूक वल वलो ऐं वोक गीता आहे इश्क जी.
A cry arose in the wilderness, like the cry of the quail. This cry and this lament were actually both the sigh of love.
So at the start of the game, you're invited to pick 15 people from your life that have meant something for you, and they accumulate on this bar on the left. And then as you journey, you unlock Vitai's verses as shown in the trailer. And then with each verse, you have to answer a question about your relationships with the people that you chose. And in order to answer, you essentially have to let go of one of them until you're left with just one person at the end, which is yourself. And when each name is dropped, you get a speck of sand on the bar, which is symbolized by the diamonds that you see. Here's an example. This verse talks about the patience of the lover. So the challenge is to sacrifice a friend that has been patient with you. And at the end of the game, you, the player, which is a fresh grain of sand entering in from the top right, joins in with the others, and you're swallowed up by the ground to enter a mystical underground scene where basically all of these grains of sand would turn into stars in an underground sky that would represent yourself and these precious people in your life, and they would merge in together to express the nature of divinity. So let's talk about the emotional process of making a project like this. Elizabeth Sampat is a game designer. In her book, Empathy Engines, she explores how technology can be sensitive and form a connection between human beings. I was introduced to her by my professor, Mio Van Stanis, who basically was teaching the 3D media class where we developed the game itself. She talks about setting the roots of a game. The first step is to establish what part of you will be in the game. Do I want to explore something affected me, or do I want to immerse players in the narrative based on my reality? I considered her words. This is a picture of my flat in Paris where I lived in the spring of 21. That February, I shifted locations mid-pandemic to attempt living alone for the first time. I was dealing with the loss of a grandparent after their 4-year-long struggle with cancer. I was dealing with loss of friendships that I thought would last forever. And I was asking myself whether the pain that comes with having human relationships is worth having them. So the idea of Sassi came along with these reflections and my struggle to consider my relationship with myself and with the human beings that I loved. I pitched my idea to this group of friends who are also my fellow classmates at Parsons. All of us have different cultural backgrounds. None of us, not even I, speak Sindhi, which is the language of the verses. So from top left to right, we have Celine, who's from Turkey, Tessa, who's American, Fede, who's from Italy, and bottom left to right, we have Gaia, who's Israeli, Olivia, who's from Lebanon, and Aya, who's from Jordan. All of us were grappling with separate struggles in our lives. And when I pitched this idea to them, there was an echoing of the universality of the concept of self-love and the base humanity in the story of Sassi and the theme that brought everyone on board to work together. So the process of creating this thing had so much intimacy in it because we were a group of friends who'd known each other for so long. And this intimacy echoes in the elements of our work. Since the game asks players to be vulnerable, we had to be vulnerable back to the game. We made an effort by creating all of the elements by hand. We have our hand calligraphy in there. We have our voices in there, which was uncomfortable for many of us, but I think it worked in order to get across the idea that we wanted to convey. The last key aspect of the project is that in the story of Sassi and in the fact that Bhatai's poetry is written from a female point of view, is that there's a huge feminist significance. And Mayor Shibble explains, in the province of Sindh, a special aspect of mystical appreciation of women can be observed that is rarely encountered in other parts of the Muslim world, meaning the representation of the human soul, the longing soul, in the form of a woman. The tragic heroines of Sindhi and Punjabi folktales like Heer, Sassi, Soni, and many others represent the human soul in the search for the beloved. At that time, most of the other traditions in Islam, such as the Persian ones, would be representing the human through young men. So the feminine element is very valuable to our project because it's been developed by a group of all 7 women. And we were also led in the technical sphere by my professor Mio, who is also a woman. And also, the field of video game design historically has been skewed in the gender ratio and plagued with both bias and stereotypes. In 2019, only 24% of game developers in the industry were female. So the symbolism that comes with the source content and organization of the team is poetic. Now, my work continues in the vein of an exploration of femininity, collaboration, and navigating the physical spaces in Pakistan. I'm excited to announce that me and one of the key collaborators in the Sassi project, my close friend Tessa Mackay, were awarded a new school student research award to create a new work called Sultana's Dream this summer in Pakistan. Sultana's Dream is a 1905 Bengali feminist utopian story where women occupy public spaces and men are restricted indoors, leading to a role reversal of traditional society structure. So here in New York, walking is an integral part of my daily life. But in Karachi, we find an environment where women rarely feel safe enough to be on the streets alone. There's a marginalization of femininity, not just the woman. If I were to wear loose clothes and hide my femininity, I would feel safer in public spaces. Similarly, if a man was to express his femininity in a public space, he would be marginalized as well. Like, I remember this once, my brother, with his long and hairless legs, was going outside dressed in short shorts, and my dad thought it would be inappropriate for him to do that. So to find a symbol of femininity, I immediately think of the Arabian jasmine flower, also known as Motia, Mogra, Raat Ki Rani. They are the national flower of Pakistan, a divine symbol of femininity in the Himalayan region, and they command a presence in public spaces where they are sold in the form of bracelets and necklaces. They are used for diverse rituals like weddings and funerals to decorate women's hair. And we plan on creating life-size sculptures of women made from a metallic mesh and Motia flowers. These images are of a prototype that we've been working on. The flowered figures will be installed in public spaces in central Karachi, Pakistan this summer, and the installation will be recorded as the flowers slowly disappear. They will be picked off, they'll wilt, they'll decay, they'll fly away, and they'll leave behind a figure that's transparent, see-through. This will convey the ephemerality of the Sultana's dream and the current invisibility of non-male people within public spaces. I would love for anyone interested in being added to the mailing list for Sultana's Dream to reach out to me via email with Sultana's Dream in the subject line, or drop your email in the chat on Zoom and me and Tessa will get in touch with you. Thank you.